All right, so here we have a circle. Everybody knows what a circle is? Different circle is made up of different components. First of all, look at the point O. What would you call that? Okay, what's another word for middle? Center of the circle. Okay, it is important. All right, just this way. I think that should do. All right. E is a line segment. Notice it goes through the center. From one point on the circle, looks like sort of to the opposite side of the circle. That would be, Sadie, the diameter. Okay. And the diameter is segment with endpoints on the circle. Passes through the center. And we refer to it as little b. Radius. As a segment from a point on the circle the radius to the center. Okay, this color. What's the relationship between radius and diameter? If you know the radius, could you tell me the diameter? If you know the diameter, could you tell me the radius? Right? Or the diameter is twice the radius. Good. Yeah. So the diameter is 2 times the radius. Radius is half the diameter. Two things you did with circles is you found circumference and you found area, I believe. Did you guys do that last year? Okay. So the circumference of a circle, that refers to, it's like the perimeter of the circle. We just don't use perimeter. So it's the distance around the circle. And in any circle, if you measure its distance around, and if you divide it by its diameter, if you measure its diameter, you will always get a certain number. The circumference of any circle divided by its diameter. Will always equal a certain number, the same number. Remember the name of that number. Etc., etc., otherwise known as pi, right? So will always equal 3.14159 something, or we just refer to it as pi. So using that little tidbit, if the circumference divided by the diameter equals pi, then working backwards, pi times the diameter must equal the circumference. So that's a formula. Space here. Pi times the diameter. We don't use the times symbol, we just put them beside each other. Okay. So if you know the diameter, and then you just multiply it by pi to find the circumference. And I'm sure you guys are used to either using a calculator or doing it by longhand, multiplying by 3.14. There is another formula that we can use to find the circumference using the radius. Well, the diameter is twice the radius. So therefore, you could also find the circumference by doing 2 times pi times the radius. Either one of those will get you the same answer. They have to, because the diameter is always 2 times the radius, and pi is pi. Do you remember the area? It's got pi in it. Pi r squared. So we take the radius and square it, and we multiply by pi. So you should be familiar with those. We don't do a heck of a lot with circles. Okay. But you should be familiar with these ones, just like the basic shapes, rectangles, squares, triangles. You should be familiar with their perimeters and areas. Okay. So let's look at some examples. And there's actually 2 ways that you can answer area and circumference of circles. One, you don't even need a calculator, because you're not even going to use pi. You're not going to multiply by pi. One way is we leave the pi symbol in our answer. The other way is we actually take a number and multiply by pi and get a number answer, a numerical answer. So if we want to find the circumference of it, let me just show you this by example. So calculate the circumference that has a radius of 5 centimeters. So remember, circumference, if I'm using radius, equals 2 pi r, which is 2 times pi times r. Well, I'm told that r is 5. So 2 times pi times 5. Now remember, 2 times pi times 5, because everything's getting multiplied, the order that I multiply doesn't matter. So I could reverse this as 2 times 5 times 5. So I could say that this, hello. I could say that this is 10 times pi. I'm going to find my answer by going 10 times pi. That's one way you can actually leave your answer. You don't have to use a calculator. You don't have to multiply it through. We call this, and sorry, I should put the units centimeters. We call this leaving it in terms of pi. Meaning you actually don't go through with the multiplication. So that's one way, the easier way that you could leave your answer. The other way is to actually do the work and round your answer. Because remember, it's always going to have to be rounded because pi is a number that never repeats and never ends. So if you use a calculator 10 times 3.141459, etc., you're going to get some long decimal answer that you got to remember. Can I have a question, or are you just stretching? Okay, that's all right. So we actually use the pi key. Okay. Now you can use 3.14 on your calculator, or if you want to be a little bit more precise, you can use the pi key that you should have on a scientific calculator. And when you do that, 10 times the pi key and round it to one decimal place, you should get 31.4. This we would call the numerical answer. This one is actually more precise. Because as soon as we start using a calculator, we're estimating pi, which means we're estimating the answer. Okay? So you could be asked, if you were asked to find the circumference or area, which we'll do, okay? You could be asked to leave your answer in terms of pi, in which case you'd stop here. Or you could be asked to round your answer to some decimal place, in which case you got to go further. Okay? If you're not asked, if you're just asked to find the circumference of something and I don't tell you what to do with it, I'd stop there. Oh, shoot. This should actually be this stuff. I didn't realize, forgot I split it up into 2 questions. This stuff should be down there. Because here I asked you to express it in terms of pi. Here I asked you to round your answer. Sorry, I thought I asked you in the same question. So the answer to this example would be 10 pi centimeters, and the answer to the same example, but you're asked to round it, would be 31.4. Okay, let's have a look at an area question. Calculate the area of a circle that has a diameter of 14. Now this is, I asked you to show your answer 2 ways. So express your answer in terms of pi, which means the pi symbol should be in your answer. Or do the next step and actually do the multiplication on your calculator and round it. So what's the area again? Pi r squared. And what is r in this example? Right, which will be 7. And remember order of operations, which we've already talked about. You square first and then times the pi after. So this would be pi times 49. But that's not a good way to write it. We want to write it 49 pi. Always want to write the number first and then the pi symbol at the end. looks better that way. Pi 49 looks. What are the units? Centimeters squared because it's area. So that's terms of pi. So if I ask you to answer in terms of pi, you'd stop here. Okay, so this is terms of pi. But if I asked you to go a little bit further and round your answer, well, then you've got to actually do 49 times the pi key, or 49 times 3.14. And if you do 49 times 3.14 on your calculator, and do that in my head, you would get approximately, and if you rounded it to decimal places, 153.94 centimeters squared. That's using the pi key. If you use 3.14, you might get a slightly different answer. 49 times 3.14 gives you 153.86. 49 times the actual pi key will give you this. Both are correct. Yeah, both are correct. Yes, I will. Yeah. Yeah, because you're still doing it right. Okay, so that's circle, circumference, and area. We could also do parts. Specifically, a semicircle. We're asked to find the circumference or perimeter of a semicircle that has a radius of 2 meters. Well, remember, a semicircle is going to look something like this. And the radius, the distance from here to here, is going to be 2 meters. How do I find the circumference of a semicircle? How do I find the circumference of a circle? What's the formula? 2 formulas. One you can choose from. Tell me the formula of the circumference with r in it. 2, what's the circumference? What's the formula?
2 pi r.
2 pi r. That's a whole circle. What would you do to find semicircle? What would you do with this? Yeah, divided by 2. But the thing you got to watch out for with this is we haven't found the complete perimeter yet, have we? This points you this part. But this is part of the perimeter. So we also have to add a diameter. What happens when we times 2 and divide 2? Yeah, so I'm not going to use that anymore because I know they're going to cancel each other out. So to find my circumference, I just have to do pi times the radius of the semicircle and then add the diameter. So I just have to do pi times the radius, which is 2, and add the diameter, which is 4. And if you use the pi p, you should get 10.28. And I think that's what you'll get to if you use 3.14. I think you'll get the same answer in this case. So that's a semicircle. Again, not going to be doing a lot of these, but you should be familiar with. Okay. All right. finally, here's an interesting one. Get you to think a little bit. What if you're asked to work backwards? What if you're given the area and asked to find the radius? What do you think the radius of this one would be if its area is 81 pi? What's the area formula again? Pi r squared. I'm told that the area is 81.81 pi, pardon me. Told that the formula is 81 pi. So 81 pi must be pi r squared. Well, pi equals pi, right? So doesn't 81 have to be r squared? 81 has to be the radius squared. So if 81 is the radius squared, what's the radius? What times itself gives you 81? 9. So the radius would be 9 centimeters. Okay. So that's a little twist on it, working backwards to find a radius or diameter. And if I asked you to find the diameter, well, you just take this and times it by 2 and tell me the diameter is 18 centimeters. Any questions? Okay.